Behind the Shades.
So you're having a date with the one person that's guaranteed never to disappoint you, and that's
Listen,
yourself.
that is me. I like being around me, and that hasn't always been the case. I like being in a space with myself.
So when you mentioned that wasn't always the case, how did you come to that point in your life where you're like, I'm comfortable with me. I don't need other people around to be as comfortable.
It was quarantine. I actually have recently written an article for a digital magazine about um, introversion and how I discovered it. But it was quarantine, and you know, I'll post the article, so I won't dive into it too much. But um, I am a born into Christianity. I'm a pastor's kid, born into Pentecostalism. I'm the oldest of four girls, born 2 years apart. Come from a singing family, both sides. Come from a preaching family, both sides. So I was definitely shaped, if you will, for always being in front, always leading out front, speaking out front. And so my life up until quarantine was very, 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 very social. Um, and then quarantine happened. And so quarantine didn't make me an introvert. Quarantine introduced me to my introverted self. Um, I did not know, because of how I had been, again, molded, that I was an introvert. Soon as that quarantine button was pushed, introversion knocked on my door, introduced itself, and I embraced it immediately. And that let me know this is who I've always been. It wasn't a struggle. I didn't have to adjust, nothing. I was happy. And I was like, where did this come from? How have I been missing it all this time? And so, yeah, it was quarantine that let me know this is who I am, and this is where I'm powered and empowered. I feel more empowered as an introvert than I ever have as a leader.
Do you
It's
think
crazy.
sometimes that, like, if I take myself and I say that I'm a social person similar to you, going out, enjoying the company of others, and then we're putting a situation like many of us over the last few years, right, where it's like you need to learn to stay at home. Was there a little bit of a struggle in the beginning? You're trying to figure it out, or is it something along the lines of saying that I kind of like this,
It
I
was
can
like
do this?
I kind of like this and I could do this. I literally learned that I could go. I don't think I went more than 3 days, but there were segments of quarantine that I could go 2 and 3 days without speaking, literally. So it was like, this is powerful. It was meditative. I think that's a word. And so actually today you're the second person I've spoken to, and maybe the last person I speak to today. Um, lots of I should say um I have great quality friendships and relationships. And for some reason a lot of us are the same. We don't, we don't, everybody's quiet. And so we are having conversations intentionally, not just, for no reason. And so if there isn't something to talk about, we aren't calling each other, you know. If there's not something to do, we aren't reaching out to each other. Um, and so, if it's to just check in, I talked to a friend today who traveled, and I'd been meaning to check in with her and make sure she got back okay. That was the reason I called. Versus, girl, what you doing? Eh, you know. So, so yeah, Uh, I like it. It reveals, I'm trying not to get into the article, but one of the funnest experiences is the revelation of wisdom that comes out of silence. And so don't get me wrong, in the moment of silence, you may not hear any kind of wisdom. No wisdom may be revealed, but I can trace wisdom back to silence. When wisdom is revealed, I can trace it back to moments of silence where wisdom is birthed. Planted. Wisdom is planted, but then birthed later. And so that's probably one of the funnest things. I think the second is the gift of observation. Again, a friend and I were talking. We were talking about Will Smith and Chris Rock, and I just don't have a lot to offer. I don't have a lot of opinion. Just observation. These people live in worlds unknown to me. And so because of that, I think it's important to observe, but I'm also grateful that I have the ability to observe, just to be quiet. That has really been a big thing for me this year for a lot of reasons, especially spirituality and wisdom. Oh my gosh. I mean, every platform, every person who has a platform has something to say about their disdain for Christianity, and Christianity has a platform to talk about their disdain for Beyonce, and I mean, it's just constant back and forth, and it's just like, is anybody gonna just be quiet? So that's kind of where I've been lately.
I had a conversation with one of my neighbors today, and it highlights what you just said about being quiet. We're just talking, and he was giving me all these facts, similar to like how you mentioned that Will Smith and Chris Brown. He's throwing all these things out there, and each time he says something, I'm like, "Oh, really? That did happen?" And then he stops, and he's like, "Do you not watch the news?" I'm like, "No, I'm unplugged. I don't have cable." He was like, I was like, "You'll be surprised how more positive, how happier the world looks when you remove yourself from these situations." Because he was talking about this person was shot, this person was robbed, this person died, this person of this background is fighting this person of this background. And I had no idea what he was talking about. It wasn't like I was oblivious to the world. I understand the workings of the world. But the news that he was talking about, I turned around, I told him, you for the 10, 15 minutes of this conversation, you haven't told me anything about you, but what you talk about is telling me so much about you. Because I see what interests you. You rather talk about what other things that's going on instead of saying, my kids are well, I'm doing well, things of that nature. So when you decided to find the wisdom in silence and decided to say, this is going to be the new version of me, and I love it. Was it something that were the people around you as receptive, or did you find maybe something started to change because you became a new person?
I'm listening to your word choices because I didn't settle myself to find the wisdom in silence. I think, again, the pandemic, the quarantine introduced me to silence, and silence then revealed wisdom. So I didn't position myself. I'm going to choose to know. I am in Georgia. I don't have family here. Excuse me, y'all, my glasses are driving me nuts, but I don't have family here. And so I had no choice but to be myself, because everybody was scared, be by my, or with myself, I like to say, because everybody was scared to be around people. And so, so often I was, just with myself. And so in that, wisdom was being revealed in the silence that introduced itself to me. in quarantine. I what, as it relates to my relationships, what started to happen is the relationships that are pure or not, or lacked purity, the ones that had that were toxic, started to reveal themselves and drop off. So there wasn't, so the ones that have remained are the ones that should be. And I had recently, I'm telling on myself, but recently I went to bed and didn't realize till the next day, around about lunchtime during my planning period, that I realized that my phone hadn't been on silent since the night before, the day before. I slept all night and my phone didn't beep, buzz, nothing. I was so grateful that I had done the work and that my circle is such that everybody is asleep. You know, I had done the work because I turned on silent because of I had people in my circle, in my world, who, you know, had no regard for rest. And so, or don't get rest and just have no regard for me, who, you know, seeks to rest. And so now it's either I've done the work, because I've had to have conversations with family members, with people who I thought were my friends who are not anymore, about, you know, please let me rest. Well, turn your phone on, do not disturb. I shouldn't have to make that adjustment. I'm not up texting you. You texting me. You know, I'm not up sending Instagram, you know, messages over and over, and one video after the next, you know, and now it seems that anyone who is left sleeps at night, you know, and if they don't, they're considerate enough to allow me to. And so there's a lot of underlining, if you will, kudos, for lack of a better term, in my circle. People are sleeping. They want rest. Or if they aren't, I have considerate friends in my circle, you know, considerate family members in my circle. And that is, that's a blessing.
I remember a time where I had to make a rule. 10 p.m. and I'm not answering anybody. As my father used to say, if it's an emergency, you call 911. Right?
not if it's an emergency
right?
Call me, but if it's an emergency, call 911.
Yeah, because he's like, what can I do?
Right. Right. My rule, I made a rule that I wouldn't speak to my married friends, particularly my guy friends who are married, after 11 o'clock. Certain married friends after 10. So yeah, I understand those boundaries, and that's always fun too. The more I create boundaries, the better I get at it.
I agree. I had I'm going to share this story because this person and I are no longer friends. So there was there was a time where there was someone who, you know, Facebook, how people trying to reconnect, and there's these memories. So there was someone who I knew years ago, back when I was in elementary school and high school. So this is like 10, 15 years ago. And I guess a memory came up and she would send me a message. Hey, do you remember me? So on and so forth. And I didn't. Like, I was just truthful. I didn't remember this person. And then she sent me a second message. Okay, this person actually knows me. So I went to their profile and I looked at it and I found that they're married and they have kids. And then, but something in me told me to check the time of the messages. It was 2:00 in the morning, 3:00 in the morning. And I'm thinking, I'm looking at the picture of your husband. I'm looking at your message to me. I'm looking at your picture of your kids. I'm looking at your message to me. And it goes back to the boundaries. It's like when you mentioned the married couple, are you, one, texting someone else, messaging someone else while you're laying next to the person that you're married to, or
Mhm.
you coming out of the bed and saying, I'm just going to the washroom or I'm just going to get a glass of water. Let me do this. And
Mhm.
you're right. It shouldn't be, the responsibility is not on us to turn off our phones, put on do not disturb, or put it way over in the corner of another room.
Right.
We should all have the self control,
Right.
right?
You know, I think the other thing too is everybody, especially if you're married, everybody doesn't need to know that you're awake. Everybody doesn't need to know that you are not sleeping with your husband. Everybody doesn't need to know that you are not sleeping alongside your wife. Everybody don't need to know that. So whether, if you're up or, you know, awake, if you go to bed at different times, which is another revealing thing, all of those things, everybody doesn't need to know that, find something else to do. Stop liking people's posts on social media, after after hours and, it's okay to be awake if that's your thing, but everybody don't need to know that, you know?
When you were with yourself during the quarantine, were there what did you learn about yourself during that time?
How full I am. Um, so that's why I keep saying wisdom is revealed. I'm not saying that I'm not offering that it's new. It may be new to as it relates to being present or on the surface, but it's in there. And so that silence is revealed. I mean, that silence reveals what is already there. And I'm, pretty full. Um, and that's fun. But again, the fun, the I can't decide which one is more important or more enjoyable. Um, the ability to be observant is such a gift, so empowering. Um, but then there's the responsibility also of interpreting what one observes. So there's that responsibility and practice. Um, then there's the practice of what to do with what you interpret. So there's a lot of different layers, that I don't know if people talk about, but I have the ability to be in public, to be around people, and to not have anything to offer. Wow. I thought I always had to have something to offer. I mean, I'm a preacher, for God's sakes. I'm ordained. I always have an opinion. I always have something to say. There's always something I've prayed about. I've prayed about every subject or whatever, I should always have something to say. But again, to have the conversation I had today and to offer that I don't have a resolve. I don't have a resolve about Chris Rock and Will Smith. I only have it to observe. I only know, or I only think that if it were me, I would have stayed seated. I'm not sure what I would have done because I too am a fighter. So I'm not sure what I would have done. I'm a protector. I cover, being the oldest of four girls. And so I can only say that I think I would have kept my seat, but I'm not sure. I don't have the same weight, the same responsibility, the same life experiences. I don't live in the same world. It's a world. I think that they live in. It's a culture that many of us have no idea about. So I think, sometimes it's just important to be silent. I saw what I saw and thought it wasn't real. Thought, did this just really happen? But I still have not given an opinion on it. So to be able to observe and be silent, I think, is more empowering. But then again, to interpret what one observes, and then again to add to that, what to do with what one interprets as a result of observation. it all comes with responsibility.
And I think in that specific situation, that's where sometimes we get lost, right? Because we look through a situation and say, if that was me, I would have done this,
Mm-hmm.
or I wouldn't have done this. Instead of, to your point, maybe taking a step back and saying, let me analyze the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It was unfortunate. I think many people will say that from their observation.
Mm-hmm.
And many people will say that violence on a public forum like that shouldn't have happened,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you just leave it there. Everything else is, well, if I was in this situation, I would have, you don't necessarily know.
Mm-hmm. You don't
Right?
know. I mean, I think it is unfortunate that it happened. That might be the only place I stop. Um, I have nothing else after that. I think it's unfortunate that it happened because I am, from my observation, um, believe that, Will Smith was so hurt by his own reaction. I think he shocked himself even, and was regretful immediately. But that's what I observed. Um, Nonetheless, it's great to live in a world full of people with resolves and be one who doesn't offer one, who doesn't have one to offer. Um, Lately, all I have is a shh.
So take us through your book, which is displayed behind you. Lord, I don't want to die a Christian. How did that come about? And what's the meaning behind that name?
Thank you for asking. Again, born to Christianity. I offer in the book, I was born a Christian, because as long as, you're born to religious parents, um, you will be shaped in their beliefs. That's going to be a given, whether it be Christianity or Hinduism or Judaism, or you're going to be molded in their beliefs. And until you get to where you have a choice, that's what you are. It's what you know. So, and by having a choice, that means being aware of other options. So, you know, uh, you don't come to a place of choosing without or without being aware of options. So, as a child, even your options are in most cases controlled. So I was born a Christian, is what I say, and I expound on that in the book. Born to ministers. My grandparents were pastors. My uncles and aunts on both sides, singers and ministers and evangelists and preachers. And I mean, I just come from that culture. And I became a licensed minister, got my degree in biblical studies. Only degree I have is in biblical studies. Even ordained, but I was ordained after my first year living in China, fulfilling a 2-year contract. And so it was China. It was going away for 2 years, living in a country where the doings of Christianity would get one put out. And so without the doings of Christianity, I did not know who I was. There was no church membership, and there's no place to tithe and give offering, and there was no communion, and there was no mention of the devil, and there was no Bible studies, and there's none of that. No Western culture, religious Christianity practices, none of that. The assumption is when you come from Western culture, going to China, the assumption is that you're Christian anyway. So they're watching you. Make sure that you aren't there to do anything that is against their laws relating to religious freedom or the lack thereof. And so I had to be careful. And I learned I didn't go there really knowing what careful looked like. So over time, I had to learn to be careful. And that meant not wearing clothes that had religious sentiments on them, expression. That meant, maybe hiding my crucifix, or I couldn't carry my Bible everywhere I went like I did here in the States. So those things I had to change. But then as I changed them, well, now how do I represent what I believe? Who am I without all of this stuff? Do I really believe what I was representing? And so I went through that whole process. I was challenged to ask questions of the things I believed because I was living without them. And when I came back from China after my second year, I went back to church as I'd always done, except for those 2 years, and I didn't fit anymore. And I would say that while in China, my curiosity inhaled. And when I came back from China, my curiosity exhaled into this book. My time back triggered questions even more, and I started to document them, and it turned into this book.
So when you couldn't display your religion externally, did that have an impact on you, even though that the religion was very close to you internally?
Maybe it wasn't as close to me internally. And how would one know except all of these things be taken away? Come on now, that's good psychology. You know what I mean? It makes for good preaching, because how will you know how close it is internally unless all that is external is taken? All that
The
you
point.
have that represents what you believe, your car tag, and your clergy collar, and all of the things the parking spot that has your name on it, the marquee that has the name of your church on it, the fan that has your denomination on it. When those things are taken away, then we find out, were you really that close? And so I don't remember what your question was. I think I answered it, but probably not the way you expected. But how close was it? How close was I? I mean, literally, I carried my Bible every day, such that people I had gone to church with, had done ministry with, wrote a song about it. Now I'm in a country where I can't do that. How close was I? The reason I did that is because I lacked identity. So I was giving myself or clothing myself or hiding, if you will, the fact that I did not have identity behind what was supposedly giving me identity, Christianity. I didn't know who I was. Who was I without all of it? Who was I? So I went on that journey to find out, but it started with me asking questions about what Christianity taught me.
Were you able to find your identity?
Was I about to?
Or did you find it?
Yeah, but it was a journey. You know what it was? It was learning who I was not. I love to use that word, reveal. It was learning who I wasn't first. And as I did that, as I pulled those layers back, then who I am began to be revealed. Makes sense? So it wasn't a, okay, you're not a Christian now who are you going to be? It wasn't that. I came here, I came to the world with an identity. I like the idea of God knowing who I was before I was in the womb of my mother. That idea was introduced to me through the book of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah says, God said to him, before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. I like that idea. But who was I? Who is it that God knew, before I was in the womb? I had to ask myself that question and try to fill in those blanks. But, that comes even over time. It's not just the answer, okay, this is who I am. But there is this willingness to find out now, because I am stripping away what Christianity said I am. So one of the things I found out is that I'm curious, and it's okay to be curious about how all of this works. Because let religion tell it. They have the answer, and it works this way. So there's no reason to be curious about the planets and the solar system and the animal kingdom and the people kingdom, the humanity, breath, life, lights. How does all this work? Why is it working? What is it for? Christianity didn't allow for that curiosity. And so now, evolving out of Christianity gives me permission to ask those kinds of questions.
I know when I'm asked that question, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Similar to you sometimes want to say, okay, this is what I am not.
Mm-hmm.
Because many of us will say, okay, I'm a man, I'm a black man, I'm a this and I'm that, right? You begin to identify with the most obvious and many times some of the most superficial things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you mention this is what I am not, that's where it's more of a reflective internal assessment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're saying that this is what I am not, even though maybe years ago you were that,
Mm-hmm.
you're not that today.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're going forward, you know what you're going to be because you don't want to look in the rear view mirror. You want to continue to look through the dashboard and say, hey, I know where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
Is that similar to you where you know what you're not today, but you're working to become something even better tomorrow?
I can kind of agree with the first part of it. I know who I was not, and who I am is continuously being revealed. Every year, where I come from, every year there's this theme of what the year is going to be, especially in the Pentecostal Black church. This is the year of manifestation. This is the year of God's faithfulness. This is the year of peace. And this is the year of joy, I'd say probably for the last 3 or 4 years, I've said, this is a new year. And I am maintaining the same position, surrendered and grateful. And so my focus is on the position, not on the becoming. Y'all write that down now.
Take notes, everyone. She's dropping gems, okay?
Listen.
Take notes.
My focus is on the position, is staying surrendered and staying grateful. Not on the becoming. Those positions will reveal the becoming as I continue to stay focused on the position.
If you could, what's something that you would want to tell the next generation of people coming up who are trying to understand what they're not and trying to have who they are be revealed to them as they go forward?
That's a great question. What would I tell them? Let me see here. Ask questions. Be curious. I think the only way we're going to get to that kind of place is to be curious, ask questions, observe more. Gosh, I wish I had known all these years that I'm an introvert. When I tell you quarantine was just what, 2020?
Yeah, not that long ago.
I was 47? No, 45, 46. So we're talking about a lot of years that I did not know. I didn't know I was an introvert. And so, if I'd known sooner, that I was curious, that I had this gift of observation. I would have been, I'd be healthier today. I'd be a healthier version of myself today. Be curious, ask questions, ask why. And if you can't ask why of those who've been given the task of preparing you for the world, be careful, but do research, read books. I want to say use your resources, but use them wisely, because I'm also work in education. I don't want to say, use the internet. It's not not the best place, but read some books, find some books to read, find a mentor, one who represents where you want to go, one who reflects, a well-rounded perspective of life, the world, around us. Stay curious.